McDonald's fired worker for feeding leftovers to homeless kids, unaware who was watching. In the fast-paced world of McDonald's, where orders come in quick and customers leave even quicker, one worker's small act of kindness was about to change her life forever. Her name was Jenna. She wasn't a manager. She didn't own the franchise. She was just one of the crew members, working the evening shift, flipping burgers, and taking orders with a smile. Jenna was someone who had a soft spot for people who were struggling, and she knew all too well what it felt like to go without. That's why, every night, she did something she thought was harmless. After closing, there were always leftovers. Burgers, fries, nuggets. Things that would otherwise be thrown away. Jenna couldn't bring herself to waste food, especially when just down the street, a small group of homeless kids often huddled near the corner, hungry and cold. So, after her shift, she'd quietly pack up some food and take it to them, hoping to brighten their evening in the smallest way. She never told anyone at work. It wasn't a grand gesture in her eyes, just something she felt was right. Who would it hurt? These were kids after all. Innocent children who needed a break in life. But as with any good deed, there's always a risk. One particular evening, Jenna felt something different in the air. She had just handed over a few leftover burgers and fries to the kids when she noticed a man across the street watching her closely. His expression was unreadable, and she couldn't tell if he was upset or just curious. It gave her an uneasy feeling, but she brushed it off and went about her night. What Jenna didn't know was that this man was not just a random passerby. He was someone important, someone with the power to turn her life upside down. And he had seen everything. Days went by, and Jenna continued her routine. But the nagging feeling of being watched wouldn't leave her. She started noticing small things. Managers whispering in the back. The higher-ups making surprise visits. Something was definitely going on, but no one said a word to her. Then one day, out of the blue, she was called into the office. Jenna's heart raced as she sat down across from her manager. She wasn't sure what this was about, but the look on her boss's face didn't seem promising. "We need to talk," he said, his tone serious. "We've received some complaints." Her stomach dropped. Complaints. About her. What had she done wrong? As the manager started talking, Jenna's mind raced back to that evening. The man, the food, the kids. Had someone reported her? Could this small act of kindness really get her into trouble? Before she could process what was happening, her manager's words hit her like a brick. "You're being let go." She stared at him in disbelief. Fired. For what? Feeding some leftover food to kids who had nothing. It didn't make sense. But what Jenna didn't know was that the man watching her was not just any random onlooker. He was connected to someone who could change everything in an instant. Jenna's world felt like it was crumbling. As she walked out of the manager's office, her head spun with confusion and anger. She had worked at McDonald's for almost 2 years. Always on time, always respectful, and she got along with her co-workers. She couldn't wrap her head around the fact that feeding homeless kids, something so simple and compassionate, had cost her the job she depended on. And for what? A few burgers that would have gone to waste anyway. She needed answers. After being fired, she asked around the crew, trying to figure out if anyone knew who had complained or how this all blew up so quickly, but all she got were blank stares and awkward silences. It was clear that no one wanted to talk. Her co-workers were too scared to get involved, afraid that whatever had happened to her could happen to them. It left Jenna feeling more isolated than ever. As the days passed, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just a company rule about food waste. She thought back to that night, the man who had been watching her so intently. Could he have been the one to report her? She didn't recognize him. But there was something about the way he looked at her that stayed with her. She decided to do a little digging. With nothing but time on her hands now, Jenna spent her days around the neighborhood, hoping to find the kids she had helped. They were always moving from place to place, but eventually, she found them huddled near an alleyway, just as she remembered. She approached them cautiously, not wanting to scare them off. The kids recognized her instantly, and for the first time in days, Jenna felt a small sense of relief. She started asking them if they had noticed anyone watching them that night, anyone who might have seemed out of place. The kids were hesitant at first, but one of the older boys spoke up. "There was a man, yeah," he said, his voice low. "We've seen him before. He's not from around here, but he shows up sometimes, just watching." This only deepened the mystery. Why would a stranger be watching a group of homeless kids? And why would he care about a McDonald's worker giving them food? Something didn't add up. Jenna was determined to figure out who this man was and why he had such an interest in what she was doing. Meanwhile, the tension was building. Word about Jenna's firing had started to spread, and not just among her co-workers. Some regular customers had noticed she was no longer there and started asking questions. Others in the community, especially those who knew about the kids, began to speak up. Jenna wasn't just any employee. She was someone who cared, someone who had quietly been making a difference, in small but meaningful ways. As more people learned about what had happened, support for Jenna began to grow. But so did the pressure from McDonald's corporate. They were adamant that their policies had to be followed, no matter the circumstances. This was about more than just Jenna. It was about setting an example, enforcing the rules. What made things even more complicated was that the mystery man hadn't disappeared. He kept showing up near the restaurant, near the kids, always watching from a distance. It was like he was waiting for something, but no one knew what. Rumors began to swirl. Some thought he might be a private investigator, hired by the franchise owner to keep tabs on what was going on. Others speculated he had ties to local authorities, and Jenna's actions had somehow triggered something bigger. As the days wore on, Jenna started to feel the weight of everything crashing down on her. She had lost her job, her routine, and her sense of purpose. But as the mystery deepened, so did her resolve. She wasn't going to back down. She had to know why her simple act of kindness had spiraled into something so much bigger. One day, while walking near the corner where she had first spotted the man, Jenna saw him again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She crossed the street, heart pounding, and approached him. "Why are you watching me?" she asked, her voice firm but trembling. The man looked at her, his expression as unreadable as ever. For a moment, there was only silence between them. Then finally he spoke. "You're not in trouble for what you think," he said, his voice low. "It's not about the food." Jenna's mind raced. Not about the food. What else could it possibly be about? Before she could ask another question, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Jenna was left standing there, more confused than ever. If this wasn't about the food, then what had she been fired for? And who was this man really? The tension had reached its peak. Jenna was caught in the middle of something much larger than she had anticipated, and she had no idea how deep it went or what the next move would be. But one thing was clear. Whatever was happening, it wasn't over yet. As Jenna stood there, watching the man fade into the distance, she realized that her search for answers was only just beginning. Jenna couldn't shake the cryptic words of the man who had just walked away. "It's not about the food." What could he possibly mean? She felt more unsettled than ever, but now her determination was stronger. Something much bigger was happening. and it was clear she was being kept in the dark. The next day, Jenna decided to speak to one of her old managers, who had always been kind to her. Maybe they knew more than they were letting on. When she called and asked to meet, the manager agreed, but warned her to be careful. That only fueled Jenna's curiosity. When they met, the manager seemed nervous, glancing over their shoulder, as if they were being watched. "I'm sorry, Jenna," they said, voice low. "There's more going on than I can explain. The decision to fire you didn't come from here. It came from higher up, and it wasn't about what you did with the leftovers. There's something else they're protecting." "What do you mean?" Jenna pressed. "What are they protecting?" The manager hesitated, then leaned in closer. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but that man you saw watching you, he's been around for a while. We think he's part of some internal investigation. They're looking into a scandal with one of the higher-ups. Something about money, donations. We don't know all the details, but they've been keeping a close eye on the store and everyone connected to it." Jenna felt her heart sink. All this time, she had thought it was her act of kindness that had gotten her fired, but it was something much larger, a cover-up, and somehow, she had been caught in the middle of it. But that wasn't the end of it. As Jenna dug deeper, she discovered that the McDonald's she worked at had been linked to a local charity organization that was supposed to be helping underprivileged kids, like the ones she had been feeding. Money had been funneled into the charity, but little of it had actually gone to those in need. The franchise owner had been quietly skimming off donations, and now someone from corporate was trying to make sure the truth didn't get out. Jenna had unwittingly become a threat to their secrecy. Her kind actions had drawn attention to the very kids who should have been helped by the charity, but weren't. Firing her was a way to silence her before she dug too deep. The pieces were falling into place, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Jenna knew that if she didn't speak up, more people would be hurt, and the kids she cared about would continue to be overlooked. But she also knew that going public with this information could have serious consequences, not just for her, but for everyone involved. Jenna decided to take a risk. She contacted a local journalist known for exposing corruption and shared everything she had learned. The journalist was intrigued, and after a few weeks of investigating, they published a bombshell article revealing the scandal. The story exploded, making headlines in the community and beyond. The fallout was swift. The franchise owner was fired, the charity was audited, and the missing donations were traced back to those responsible. Corporate McDonald's, eager to distance itself from the controversy, issued public statements and took action to clean up the mess. As for Jenna, she became somewhat of a local hero. People rallied around her for standing up to the corruption, and the kids she had helped were finally getting the support they needed. It wasn't easy, but in the end, her small act of kindness had sparked a chain reaction that brought justice to a broken system. With her name cleared and the truth exposed, Jenna was offered a new job at another McDonald's location. But this time, she had a choice. Instead, she decided to pursue something different, something that would allow her to continue helping others in a more meaningful way. In the end, what started as a simple act of feeding homeless kids had uncovered a much larger story, one of greed, corruption, and injustice. But it was also a story of resilience, kindness, and the power of one person's actions to make a difference. Jenna had been through more than she ever expected, but she walked away knowing that doing the right thing, no matter how small, can have a ripple effect that reaches far beyond what we can see. And sometimes, the person watching isn't there to tear you down, but to remind you that even in the darkest situations, light can still find a way to shine.